Hello there, this is Debbie Heiser, and I am so stinking excited to share this new season 4 with you. And I can't believe that this is already the 4th season of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. And I just want to thank each of you who listen. And my hope is that the tools, the thoughts and experiences I share, as well as the work I've done to love myself, love others, and love the work I'm called to do, that also helps me lead a truly lit up life, will help you move into a more lit up life yourself. A few things to look for in this season. Super excited to share that we're going to be coming to you now every week with episodes jam-packed with information to serve you. Every other week, you'll hear from a guest who's leading a life that they love, and I'll be asking them to share their stories, how they got there, and any thoughts or advice that they can give you, our loyal listeners. We have new music too, and I'm so thrilled to introduce this song called Ride, sung and co-written by my friend, Miss Jackie Wilson. And she, along with her collaborators, Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee, are super talented and generous, as this song fits perfectly into the thought of stepping into your best life. To follow any or all of these talented folks, check out the show notes for their social handles. Thanks again for listening. Enjoy season 4 and do us a solid and leave us a rating and a comment to help us be able to share more with people across the globe. Now, let's get started with this episode.
You're the only one who really can transform your mind.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Lit Up Life with Debbie Heiser. I am excited to come to you today with the second really of a series of podcasts that I'm doing on some of the lessons I learned while I spent 3 weeks in France. And the first week was spent with my business coach because, yes, although I'm a business consultant and a leadership coach, I'm too close to my own things and I need someone as well to help me out. And so the first week was with my business coach. The last 2 weeks was with a good friend of mine. And we went outside of Paris for the most part to visit some of the towns outside of Paris. And so I had some really key learning pieces that happened. And so I want to share those with you. But before I do that, for those of you that haven't listened before, or just as a refresher, my name is Debbie Heiser. I actually spent over 20 years as an executive in corporate America for different companies, 2 different companies, and have loved everything that I've done. But for the first time in a while, when I stepped into my own business, I felt like I was in the right vehicle. And what I try to do is I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money. And people get caught up sometimes in the money piece of it. It's really having money is about financial abundance to be able to then go do the things that you want to do. And it's not just always what people would term as things that I want to go out that are material, although that is fine and dandy to do that. No judgment on that. And I also believe that, but it's also about having this financial abundance to be able to make a bigger ripple in the world, to make a bigger impact in the world, whether that's starting a foundation, whether that's being able to do what you do and employ a team or a company of people and help those people. And it just expands, right? And for so many times I was locked in this way of thinking that was not okay, right? That we all have our money stories. And I find everyone I work with has a money story, and it shows up in different ways and will show up every time you level up into something bigger, into your spiritual DNA that you were made and called for to be here with. So anyway, I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them so that they can live a joy-filled life. And I do have a firm belief that life is too short not to have joy, not to have peace. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners where they're overwhelmed, they're burnt out, the business is really leading their life versus the business being a conduit to lead the life that they want to have. And for some people, excuse me, that is living out their purpose in their vocation or what they're called to do. Other people have some lifestyle or volunteer pieces that they want to do, and that feeds their soul. And some of that financial freedom helps to Do those things. So that's my urgency and my calling and what I have devoted my life to. And so this week's episode is really about devotion and loyalty and what that means and how that's showed up and how that has shown up in my life and what I've been recently learning about this. So when I think about devotion, I have a strong devotion, and many of you that have followed me know this, that I'm not judging what anybody wants to believe. That is between you and your creator, your spiritual grounding or not, lack thereof, right? For me, I have a faith, a Christian faith that I follow, and it's a little different than what might be preached in the church by actions. And I'm not saying that I'm all that, but it leads into this devotion and loyalty conversation in the respect that I believe, for me, that the Christ that I follow loved people and was more concerned with his own relationship with God and sharing the word, sharing his love with people, but keeping that close tie. And I do have a belief that for me, it's, if anything gets in the way of my relationship with God, then that's an issue. That's what some people would call sin. And I don't want to get too caught up in semantics, but it's important to understand that, because I have devoted my life to seeking wisdom from a spiritual perspective and from the Holy Spirit, and then going forward and stepping forward. And when I choose not to step into what I'm feeling called to do, and I believe that God is a God of clarity. If you look at the universe, if you look at nature, it has order to it. And so I believe that the universe, God, is a God of order and a God of clarity. And when I'm feeling confusion, that's a lack of trust in myself. That's fear. That's not of God. And so what does this have to do with devotion and loyalty, you say? One of the things that I'm finding is I'm devoted to my spiritual life, but I'm also realizing that it's important to be devoted to myself, and not in the ego self that people call selfish. But I think back around, and I'm going to get a little more biblical in this one, I guess, than I have in the past. So if that bothers you, I'm sorry, but hopefully weed through it. But basically looking at and saying, love yourself is a lot of times messaging within the church that's selfish, that's wrong. But in fact, one of the 10 commandments says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so I'm devoted to loving God, the Holy Spirit, and Christ, loving who I am, because as I stand in confidence, knowing that the universe, God, is for me, so who can be against me? That lends some confidence to me as I step in. But I continue to step into those things that are scary, because I'm devoted to doing what I do. I feel like I'm finally in the right vehicle, helping other people to heal, connect, learn. I'm also a teacher, and I teach at Gonzaga. And so this idea of devotion is around stepping in and owning what your, for the lack of a better word, calling is in this world. And it's not selfish to declare what you want, because you have a desire on your heart, and it's about what kind of relationship do you want to have, and realizing that the relationships you have are no better than the relationship you have with yourself. If I don't love myself, how can I love friends? How can I love someone I'm dating? How can I love my son or my sisters or my family? And because that doubt and that worry and those things that bind us up, and that self-confidence, that if we have a lack of self-confidence, all of those things get in the way of relationship. And so for me, I also have a devotion to relationship. Relationship and connection is really important to me. And I find that when I show up, like, let's say in a love relationship, one way, and it's not being authentic or being who my true self is, then that's not being devoted or committed to myself either. And so it's important to look at that. And so when we look at relationships, there's all sorts of things around that. And I know for me, and I think there's a little difference between committed and devotion. And for me, I'm committed to showing up as my best self in these relationships. I live by a set of 12 guiding principles that I work to uphold. And the first one that you've heard me talk about before, and I have a series of podcasts on it, is that I'm 100% responsible for myself and 100% responsible to others. So showing up in relationship is my way of being devoted, not only to my faith, but to myself and to those around me. And the previous episode that I did talked about expanding time and being present, and nothing is better or shows more devotion to someone than to being present and really listening. And I know when I get stressed, and I have my moments, that I don't do that very well. And so that's something I have to step back and really look at when that happens. But this idea of being devoted to something is different. Loyalty is different. I found I have been loyal to what I thought people thought I should do, right? I grew up in the Midwest, nothing wrong with that. I love the Midwest. Kansas City is one of my favorite places. My parents were phenomenal. But there's this expectation of you go to college, you graduate college, you get married, you have children, you have a job that you work 8 to 5 and then go play on the weekends. That just doesn't fit me. And so I found I was loyal to that, but loyalty has a binding kind of meaning to it, a binding kind of commitment that ultimately can start to be resented because you don't feel the devotion to it. And so for me, the best thing that I figured out from a devotion perspective for like right now, what I'm doing in my life and helping people to connect to themselves, helping people heal, helping people connect to spirit. It's about like, I'm devoted to that. I think about, and I don't say this to be like Debbie Downer, get it? I don't say it to say, oh, feel sorry for me. So please don't take this that way. But one of the things that has pushed this sense of urgency, and some would say it's because I'm over 50, and okay, there's a line of truth to that. But the other piece of it is that when I finally cleared up those areas that I didn't love about myself, and I still have moments, please don't get me wrong, but when I stepped in and owned who I was, and it's been a journey and I still have things that pop up, right? When I own that, then I can be devoted to something. And when that happened, I realized that there's a sense of urgency for me, because when I think about my mother, and, it might be a year off, but she was diagnosed with breast cancer. I want to say she was 53 or 54. My sisters and I were kind of trying to figure that out the other day. But she was diagnosed with breast cancer at 54. She went through treatments. She had a mastectomy. She was then in remission. And I don't remember if it was a year or 2 years. I could go back and do the math, but you get the picture. And after that 1 or 2 year time period, she went in for another scan and her breast cancer came back and it was in full force. And so at the age of 59, on January 1st, she passed away of breast cancer, and it had metastasized quite a ways. Now that was 15 or 16 years ago, 2005, I believe. I can't do simple math on the fly. And back in 2005, when this happened, like I didn't give it a thought as far as like what I was called to do in this world. But over the last 5 or 6 years, as I've been on this really deep, in like when I say intense, I don't mean that as a scary word, but like this deep digging of figuring out what it is that I was called here to be, I have this sense of urgency. I turned 55 this year, and it was epic. I drank champagne with some friends under the Eiffel Tower, and it will be one that I will never forget. But I look at that and I think to myself, at the age of 54, so a year ago in my life, my mother was diagnosed. And a year before that, she had no inkling of an idea that she only had 6 years left in this world, or at that time, 7 years at the age of 53. And so when I think about being 55 and I'm not manifesting what happened to her. But when I think about that, that's 4 years that she had left in her life. And I feel this sense of urgency to help other people step in, to be devoted to what it is that they're called here to do. Because when I stepped into what I feel like is my calling, it doesn't work. It energizes me. Now, there's other things that I have accountants for and bookkeepers for, that when I was doing those on my own, and there's still a few things I'm doing on my own that are not my favorite tasks as an entrepreneur, but I am devoted to getting this message out there to help people step out of what they feel like is implied expectations and step into what you feel like your niche, what you can be devoted to. Now, on that same realm, I want to kind of talk about this in a realm of the difference between devotion and loyalty. You know, I was devoted to my marriage, but then I realized it really took on a form of loyalty. Again, feeling like I'm not a proponent of divorce, but feeling like I made this covenant and I wasn't going to break this covenant no matter what. And it was not healthy for me nor my ex-husband. And as you've all heard on other things, he's a great guy. And we spent a good 29 years together, but it just wasn't working, and we both were miserable in the end. And I also believe in my faith that you know, and people might argue this, but that God doesn't want us to be miserable either. I'm not doing any good in the world when you're miserable. And frankly, I think both of us were dying in a way, right? Like just shriveling up. And so I think both of us are probably much happier now. We both joked that we're better friends now than we were when we were married. But the point being, and I don't mean to make light of that, we were friends and had some great years, but I realized I was loyal to that, right? And that loyalty felt a little bit, how do I say this? Like it was a requirement, right? And at first it started out as devotion, right? And I don't know what shifted. It just, something shifted through the years, and we've had our dark moments, and we've each had stuff that we've gone through. You know, addiction and deaths in our family, and, you know, so on and so forth. But ultimately, that loyalty is something that I used to have a badge of honor, that I was loyal to a job, right? I was loyal to a company. And after the first company that I worked for was Sprint Publishing and Advertising, and that company sold to another company, and I was told I could move or lose my job. And my mom was sick at the time, and I didn't want to move. And so when I think about that, that was the first time I had felt really loyal to that company and realized that, you know, and rightfully so, they're running a business, that there wasn't the same amount of loyalty. And that was one of the, not necessarily the first, but one of an earlier memory for me of when I realized that loyalty can be one-sided. And although I was loyal, the next best thing happened, right? I got a job at Citibank and worked with some fabulous people there. But again, looking at that and saying, is loyalty something that, I don't know, when I talk about loyalty, it just feels like it's a commitment that has chains around it, that is more of something that I feel like I have to do, right? And that puts me into the victim game. Where when I talk about devotion, it's like a heartfelt thing. It's like a all-inclusive, holistic mind, body, spirit, like heartfulness, like just thing. And I don't know how to explain it. And I know some of you listening, if you're listening for the first time, might think I'm a little out there, but it's hard to describe, like this devotion. And if you haven't felt a devotion to something, my hope is that you find something that you're devoted to. And I know for many years I was devoted to being a youth pastor, and I did that volunteer way. I worked at Citibank and in corporate America. And, you know, there are things that we are devoted to. It might be Boy Scouts. It might be devoted to helping young people do their best. Whatever that is for you, my hope is that you can tap into some of that devotion. And really that helps you step into and lead this life that has joy and meaning. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not sad times, and there's not times that I get angry or times that I get afraid. That happens. But there's just a different energy vibration that happens around being devoted. So hopefully you could weed through some of these like random thoughts that I had in Paris about being devoted to something versus being loyal. And part of that honestly came from, and I'm going to do the next podcast on serving others, was watching the people that were in the service industry in France. And in the service industry, it's very well thought of jobs that these people just, and I'm not talking just about the time that I was in a really high-end hotel, but anywhere we went, it felt like they wanted to serve. They wanted, like, that was an expression of themselves, was to serve. And so that's kind of where this whole idea of devotion and loyalty came about. And so with that, it's a wrap. If you'd like to talk to me a little bit more about this topic or any topic, or you're a business owner that wants to lead your business so you can go out and enjoy the life that you want to have, please, please, please reach out to me. My website is in the notes, and otherwise it's at www.leadyourlituplife. It's a 30-minute clarity call. So sign up for that. I would love to chat with you. And with that, it's a wrap. Everybody have a great week. We'll chat next week.